Okay, hello everyone. It's John DeHaan speaking. Um, we're doing a recording of what was a um, presentation this afternoon at the GF Social Services Advisory Group. My apologies, we had a couple technical glitches and we didn't manage to record the entire presentation. The presentation is with regard to a task we were given in subcommittee by the advisory group, that we were tasked with putting together a comparison between the campus of care model, which we are proposing at this point of time, and we've talked about for quite a long time, supportive housing that is presently on the table as per the BC housing model that everyone is already familiar with, and also what are traditional addiction recovery programs. We included the recovery programs just because they are services that are available to our vulnerable population. And so we thought it would be appropriate to include them as well. So we've got a three-way comparison: campus of care, supportive housing, and addiction recovery programs. What we've done is organized a chart for you to look at. We've got three columns, one representing each model, and then we've got individual rows touching on different elements that are sometimes shared by each of the models and sometimes not. And it will give you a pretty good idea of what each of these models looks like in comparison to the other. So with that said, our mandate was to compare. And so we'll start with the first field here, which was to identify the target clientele. We had some discussion about this. Within the campus of care, we are looking at the hard to house, precariously housed, and those without housing. That basically mimics or duplicates what BC Housing already has on the table. Same clientele: hard to house, precariously housed, and without housing. Now, of course, with an addiction recovery program, people are housed during the actual addiction recovery program, and obviously they would be people with substance abuse challenges. Okay, housing, what does it look like? Private room or unit? Would it be lockable? Private or shared bathrooms? Access to laundry facilities? Within all three of the models, those would be and are provided. I say would be within a proposed campus of care, and would be within the supportive housing model presently on the table from BC Housing. And finally, the addiction recovery program obviously would include housing as well. Access to support staff. Each one of these models / facilities would have full-time staff on board 24/7. That said, do the clients have access to those staff? In each case, the answer is yes, they would. A question was asked today at the presentation as to whether or what level of training that staff might hold. That would be largely determined by the operator. In a perfect world, we have people that are trained and have experience in dealing with these clientele. Physically, what does the space look like? Does it have a common area and meeting rooms? In all three cases, yes. So a proposed campus of care would include those two features. We've heard a lot of discussion along the line when looking at BC housing models as to whether or not there would be green space. The feeling being that green space is important and that it plays a therapeutic role. With BC housing model, that is wholly site dependent. They haven't said no, but obviously the site description and physical size of it would dictate whether or not there would be room for green space. Same with an addiction recovery program. And within the campus of care, we view it as something that we definitely would want to include. Emergency sheltering. Presently, Grand Forks has an emergency cold weather shelter. That said, would a campus of care model provide sheltering on site? There was some debate about that, but presently, what we've envisioned is that yes, the shelter and any additional housing would be located on the same property. Site is always a consideration. The bigger the site, the better, and there could be separation between the two. With the BC Housing Supportive or BC Housing Supportive Housing model, there is no provision for sheltering on site, and nor is there for an addiction recovery program. We've heard a lot about opportunities for clients. One of those opportunities being training for life skills, employment skills, etc. Would these models and do these models include that opportunity? In all three cases, yes. What would it look like? To be determined. But the thought being that training would play an important role in a campus of care. BC Housing has also indicated that their model would include a training component. Meal program for residents. A meal program is different than a kitchen. You'll see an item about the kitchen below. A meal program is basically where meals are provided. All three cases, they may or may not. Would there be a communal kitchen that would function to provide possibly a meal program, also to provide opportunity for social enterprise, in other words, feed other people at a profit as part of a training and life skills training program. Now, let me see here. I'm just trying to get it all right. Okay, we're on to the second page here. Office space. The idea with a campus of care is to get as many services on one site as possible. Now, with BC housing models, that all depends on the building itself. Would there be office space for community partner use, i.e. medical personnel, maybe a nurse, maybe a traveling doctor who would use that office on occasion. Addiction services, would they have an office? Mental health, would they have an office? In our perfect world with the campus of care, yes, they would have an office. With the BC housing model, maybe, it depends. Duration of residence. This is an ongoing topic of discussion with BC Housing. What they tell us is 2 to 3 years is the goal, but it might last forever. With addiction treatment programs, obviously there's bookends, and typically that can be up to 18 months. With the campus of care, we haven't determined what length of time ideally that clients would be welcome to stay there. Abstaining from drugs and alcohol, that's something we keep hearing from the community, but in reality, it is something that is not often done within any of the, or except for the addiction recovery program, of course, where the idea is not to do drugs and alcohol. Obviously, they are going to be abstaining. However, with the BC housing model that you're familiar with, we've heard terms like wet and dry and so on. The BC housing model would allow drug use within the confines of one's own housing. The same would probably apply to the campus of care. That is something that we have to remember. that BC Housing would be funding the campus of care if they agree that they would like to embark on this project, and that we predict will be one of the requirements, that we cannot ask for complete sobriety within the confines, the confines of their own space. Okay, would people be required to be working on a recovery plan? Neither the campus of care nor the BC housing model require a mandatory participation in a recovery plan. However, in both cases, it is encouraged, and obviously there's a role for addiction and mental health services to try and incentivize people to do that. A steps continuum. This is something that is fairly common with different housing programs, where what we're doing basically is working with clients to set goals that contribute to proactive behaviors. In other words, contributing to the community leads to a benefit. To give you an example, if one is a responsible, contributing shelter resident, that gives them a leg up down the line for more permanent supported housing. In other words, an incentive program that aids with the placement of residents. Referrals to case management. We're assuming that we're trying to encourage clients to engage in proactive behaviors, that they're going to need help, that they are going to need to be referred to specialists within the areas of addictions, mental health, possible medical assistance or support as well. And so the staff on site would be able to organize referrals for those individuals, whether they visit those professionals on site or off site is largely determined by the model. With a campus of care, the vision is to provide those services on site. Okay, connections to primary health care, mental health, and substance abuse services, much the same as what I was discussing with the last field that we were looking at. In each case, the different models are well connected and coordinated with the professionals providing those services. However, with the campus of care, again, the emphasis would be to provide those services on site. Okay, we've this is a little bit redundant. Homeless or at risk of homelessness. Those are the people that we're concerned with here. So that's a broad category. All three programs in one way or another deal with that particular clientele and service that clientele. We have provided for expansion along the way, because realistically speaking, we see, for example, a campus of care developing in phases. I don't think it's realistic to suggest that it's all going to happen at once. We would like to have it as compressed as possible, but with a favorable site, we hope to be able to provide the opportunity to do the following. We'd like to see enough room on the site to develop a tiny home site, a mini community within our own larger community. On site, all on the same site, is what we've already been talking about. some room to develop a tiny home development. A lot of what we're proposing is in response to what we've perceived as problems right now that the targeted clientele is or are posing within the community. One of them is that we've got this ongoing issue with ad hoc campsites springing up all over the place, riverbanks and so on. That said, we would like ideally to be able to refer those people, give them the alternative of coming to the campus of care and for there to be some free camping available, probably on a time limited basis. Also, for consideration with expansion, space for social enterprise. Much of what we're talking about with the campus of care has been the result of looking at other models. One of those models, and for anyone listening to this, I would highly recommend looking at an organization called Community First out of Austin, Texas, where the premise is that they've developed a closed community, basically, for people who are unsuccessful within the larger community. Same clientele we're basically talking about throughout the presentation here. Within that community, there are these items I've just been talking about, a tiny home village, alternate free camping, space suitable for social enterprise. One of the obvious choices is gardening. The Austin, Texas model has a very large market garden program. Clients work within the, not all clients, but those that wish to, and they're incentivized for doing it, work on the market garden program. They grow vegetables. The vegetables are used within their own community kitchen. They are also sold retail to the community, and they have a retail outlet on site. And the community is actually quite enthusiastic about buying their produce from the Community First Village. That's not the only social enterprise that we might be looking at. For example, in Austin, they also have an auto mechanics shop. Local mechanics volunteer their time to act as mentors. Clients basically get on the job training to do simple mechanical jobs for a fee, changing tires, doing oil changes, and kind of low risk mechanical work. Also to generate money, the participants are incentivized for their effort. That's all typical of any sort of social enterprise within this sort of programming. Finally, within our expansion vision, we also want to have a look at having enough room to provide some RV sites. We presently have quite a number of high-risk people living in unserviced RVs throughout the community, and it's been cause for concern with regard to by law enforcement and all sorts of things. And that said, it's far from ideal. And so if we could offer an alternative, we might be able to deal with some of the problem. Now, that's the comparison chart. I've been probably fairly quick in doing this. It took a lot longer this afternoon. I have to bring a couple things to your attention for your consideration with regard to this. The campus of care model is something that we've put on the table as a result of looking at other successful programs. There is nothing similar in BC. We borrowed the term campus of care actually from seniors housing, where they provide full wraparound services on site for seniors. Typically, within the realm of dealing with the homeless and high-risk clientele, it's referred to as a therapeutic community. Therefore, what we're talking about here is just nomenclature. We are referring to this as a campus of care, a therapeutic community. So within that, that kind of gives you the moniker, should you choose to want to use it. Now, we've heard from BC Housing that there's an opportunity for us to be creative here, which is precisely why we've put this on the table. We have a window of opportunity to tell BC Housing what we would like to see. This gives a basic framework for it. It by no means provides the level of detail required. Ultimately, what would have to happen with this is the city would have to negotiate with BC Housing and submit a formal plan that provides much of the detail. So again, this is a rough outline. This gives you a comparison between what's already on the table and what we are proposing. Now, the Grand Forks Social Services Advisory Group has endorsed looking at this model as a possible alternative. We are in turn, we've recommended that the city take a look at it as well, and with hopes that maybe the city sees the merit in providing full wraparound services and everything provided on one site. This, of course, becomes site dependent, and the city would have to also, in the process of considering this, consider possible options with regard to sites that they might be able to put on the table with BC Housing. Anyway, I'm going to wrap this up. I think that's neatly explained it for you. Mr. Moslin and Councillor Thompson will bring this to council for further discussion. I'm always happy to be a resource here with regard to it. And I wish everyone luck in considering this model and moving forward. So thank you for listening to me, and we'll call it an evening on this presentation. Thank you.
And thanks, John, for the second effort. Okay.